Right now, someone you trust is using a playbook against you. Not a physical weapon, not a raised voice, something far more dangerous. A calculated system designed to dismantle your reality from the inside out. Predatory manipulators don't improvise. They follow a precise sequence of psychological techniques. Intermittent reinforcement, triangulation, love bombing, devaluation, isolation, gaslighting, and future faking. 7 weapons of control. These aren't random behaviors. They're a toolkit refined over time, engineered to exploit the deepest vulnerabilities of the human psyche. And the most terrifying part, most victims never realize it's happening until the damage is already done. As the renowned psychologist George Simon warned, the most dangerous manipulators are not those who use force, but those who use charm. Today, we're pulling back the curtain on every single one of these techniques, not to create fear, but to give you the one thing manipulators cannot survive: awareness. Let's begin. It starts with a feeling you've been searching for your entire life. Someone finally sees you, really sees you. They text you constantly, shower you with compliments, make grand declarations of devotion within days. Intoxicating. It feels like a fairy tale, but here's what psychology tells us. This isn't love, it's a strategy. Love bombing is the deliberate use of excessive affection and attention to overwhelm a target's defenses. Dr. Dale Archer, a clinical psychologist, describes it as a form of conditioning. The manipulator floods you with dopamine, the same neurochemical released during drug use, creating an emotional dependency before you even realize a bond has formed. They are not falling in love with you, they are investing in your addiction to them. Think about it. Have you ever met someone who seemed too perfect, too attentive, too present? Right from the very beginning, that overwhelming intensity isn't passion. It's a calculated first move. The love bomber needs you hooked before the real game begins. Dopamine trap set. Because once you're emotionally dependent, they hold the power to give and to take away. And that leads us to the most devastating phase of all. One morning, the person who adored you wakes up cold. The compliments vanish. The warmth turns into criticism. You didn't change, but they act like you did. The person who built you up is now systematically tearing you down. This is devaluation, and it's not accidental. It's the second stage of the predatory cycle. After love bombing creates emotional dependency, the manipulator withdraws affection and replaces it with subtle, then not so subtle, attacks on your self-worth. They criticize how you dress, question your intelligence, mock your emotions. Psychologist Dr. Ramani Durvasula explains that devaluation serves a precise function. It keeps the victim destabilized and desperate to return to the love bombing phase. The abuser creates the wound, then positions themselves as the only cure. You start questioning yourself. Maybe I'm too sensitive. Maybe I did something wrong. Maybe if I just try harder, they'll love me again. That internal voice of self-doubt is not yours. It was planted there deliberately. The cruelest part, they'll occasionally give you a glimpse of the old warmth, just enough to keep you trapped. Which brings us to the engine that powers the entire cycle. Imagine a slot machine. You pull the lever and lose, you pull again. Nothing, again, nothing. Then suddenly, jackpot. That unpredictable reward is what keeps you pulling. Now imagine that slot machine is a person. Intermittent reinforcement is arguably the most powerful manipulation technique in existence. Psychologist B.F. Skinner proved through decades of research that unpredictable rewards create stronger behavioral bonds than consistent ones. When a manipulator alternates between cruelty and affection, criticism and praise, silence and attention, they're creating an addiction loop in your brain. Cruelty, then kindness, repeat. This is why victims of emotional abuse often say things like, "But when it's good, it's so good." That's not love talking. That's dopamine responding to an unpredictable reward schedule. The exact same mechanism that makes gambling addictive. If this pattern is making you rethink relationships you've been in. Hit like and subscribe to keep exploring the depths of your psyche with me. There's so much more to uncover, because the manipulator doesn't just control your emotions, they also control your perception of reality itself. You saw what you saw, you heard what you heard, you know what happened, but they look you in the eyes and tell you none of it is real. Gaslighting. The term comes from a 1944 film in which a husband systematically manipulates his wife into believing she's losing her mind, dimming the gas lights and then denying the change when she notices. But this isn't just cinema. It's one of the most documented forms of psychological abuse. Gaslighting works by attacking the victim's trust in their own perception. The manipulator denies events that happened, twists your words, and reframes situations until you no longer trust your own memory. They do not want you to question them, they want you to question yourself. Research published in the American Sociological Review describes gaslighting as a form of epistemic injustice, the systematic undermining of someone's capacity to know what they know. As the philosopher Adrian Rich once observed, the most common way people give up their power is by thinking they don't have any. The gaslighter doesn't just lie to you, they restructure your reality so that their lies become your truth. Your reality rewritten. And once your sense of reality is compromised, the next technique becomes devastatingly effective. First, they become your whole world, then they make sure you have no other world to return to. Isolation doesn't usually begin with a locked door. It begins with subtle comments. Your best friend is a bad influence. Your family doesn't understand you like I do. Your coworkers are jealous of what we have. One by one, every connection you had begins to dissolve. Psychologist Lundy Bancroft, who spent decades studying abusive personalities, identified isolation as the cornerstone of control. Without outside perspectives, the victim loses the ability to reality test, to compare the manipulator's version of events with objective truth. 1, they criticize your friends and family. 2, they create conflicts that force you to choose. 3, they monopolize your time with constant demands. 4, they position themselves as the only one who truly cares. Each step feels reasonable in the moment. That's the genius of it. You think you're making independent choices, but every choice has been engineered to tighten the web. A prison without walls is still a prison when every door leads back to the same person. And once you're isolated, cut off from everyone who could help you see clearly, the manipulator introduces the next weapon, one that makes you feel like the villain. They mention someone new at work, casually, someone who really understands them, someone who's so easy to talk to. They're not telling you they're leaving, they're telling you that you're replaceable. You are replaceable. Triangulation is the deliberate introduction of a third party into the relationship dynamic to create jealousy, insecurity, and competition. The manipulator doesn't actually need this other person. They need your reaction to the idea of this other person. Dr. Carol McBride, an expert on narcissistic family systems, explains that triangulation keeps the victim in a perpetual state of anxiety. You stop focusing on the manipulator's behavior and start focusing on proving your worth. You are no longer a partner in the relationship, you have become a contestant. The third party can be an ex, a coworker, a friend, even a stranger on social media. Sometimes they don't even exist. What matters is the effect. You feel threatened, you try harder, you give more of yourself. And in trying to compete, you hand over even more control. You become so consumed with not losing them that you forget to ask the most important question. Should you even want to keep them? But there's one more technique that traps victims in a way nothing else can. We'll move in together next year. I promise things will get better. Just wait until I finish this project and we'll finally take that trip. Lies. Future faking is the art of making promises about a beautiful future that will never arrive. The manipulator paints vivid pictures of the life you'll share. Marriage, children, adventures, success. Not because they intend to deliver, but because the promise itself keeps you anchored. Psychotherapist Shahida Arabi identifies future faking as one of the most insidious tools in the narcissist's arsenal because it exploits hope itself. Hope is the last thing to die in a victim of manipulation, and predators know exactly how to keep it alive. Every time you're about to leave, they dangle a new vision of the future, a better version of themselves, a timeline where everything works out, and because you've already invested so much, your time, your emotions, your identity, walking away feels like abandoning your own dreams. False promises, eternal chains. But here's the truth. The future they describe does not exist, and it never will because the promise is the product. You're not investing in a future. You're being held hostage by one. And this brings us to something that ties all 7 techniques together into one devastating system. Here's what most people miss. These 7 techniques aren't random. They're not isolated events. They form a cycle, a repeating loop designed to keep the victim permanently off balance. 1. Love bombing creates attachment. 2. Devaluation destroys self-worth. 3. Intermittent reinforcement creates addiction. 4. Gaslighting erases trust in self. 5. Isolation removes external support. Triangulation manufactures competition, and future faking kills the exit strategy. Each technique reinforces the others. Remove one and the system weakens, but together they create what trauma researchers call a trauma bond, a psychological attachment formed through cycles of abuse and intermittent positive reinforcement. The bond feels like love, but it was engineered like a cage. Dr. Patrick Carnes, who first described the concept of trauma bonding, found that victims of these cycles often display symptoms identical to Stockholm Syndrome. They defend their abuser, blame themselves, and feel genuine terror at the thought of leaving. As Judith Herman wrote in her landmark work on psychological trauma, the perpetrator asks the bystander to do nothing. The victim asks the bystander to share the burden of pain. Understanding this cycle isn't just academic. It's the first step toward breaking free, and breaking free starts with something the manipulator fears most. So how do you recognize it before it's too late? The first thing to understand is that predatory manipulators are not always obvious. They're often charming, attentive, and socially intelligent. They don't wear signs, they wear masks. Charm is their weapon, but there are patterns that never lie. Pay attention to the pace of the relationship. Genuine connection builds gradually. Manipulation accelerates unnaturally. If someone makes you feel like the center of the universe before they even know your middle name, that is a red flag. Watch for the consistency test. A healthy person's behavior remains relatively stable. A manipulator oscillates. Idealization followed by devaluation, warmth followed by coldness. If the emotional temperature swings dramatically and unpredictably, you're not dealing with mood swings, you're dealing with a strategy. Notice how you feel about yourself. In a healthy relationship, you feel more confident over time. In a manipulative one, you feel progressively less certain of who you are. Your self-esteem doesn't decrease naturally. It was deliberately dismantled. And the most powerful defense of all, it's simpler than you think. Every technique we've discussed today, love bombing, devaluation, intermittent reinforcement, gaslighting, isolation, triangulation, future faking, they all share one critical vulnerability. They only work in the dark, and awareness is the light that destroys them. The moment you can name what's happening to you, the spell begins to break. Manipulators depend on your confusion. They depend on you doubting your own perceptions, blaming yourself, and believing that the chaos is normal. But once you understand the playbook, you can see the moves before they happen. Knowledge does not just protect you, it fundamentally changes the game. Dr. George Simon puts it plainly. The single most effective defense against manipulation is accurate perception, not anger, not revenge, not even escape at first, simply seeing clearly. See clearly, break free. Trust your instincts. If something feels wrong, it probably is. Rebuild your connections, talk to people outside the relationship, and most importantly, remember that person who truly loves you would never need to dismantle your sense of self in order to keep you. Real love does not require confusion as a foundation. It requires clarity. Today, we pulled back the curtain on 7 techniques that predatory manipulators use to control their victims. Love bombing to create dependency, devaluation to destroy self-worth, intermittent reinforcement to forge addiction, gaslighting to erase your reality, isolation to eliminate support, triangulation to manufacture insecurity, and future faking to kill your exit strategy. 7 techniques, 1 defense. But remember, recognizing the pattern is the only defense against people who study human weakness for leverage. You now carry something that no manipulator can take from you, the ability to see clearly. As the Stoic philosopher Epictetus taught, it is not what happens to you, but how you react to it that matters. If you made it this far, comment pattern breaker to prove you're no longer someone who can be played. Your awareness is now your armor, and no one can take it from you. Welcome to the Psyche Project.